Hi guys, it's Jeff here, the photographer's mentor. It's good to be back again. And today we have Annabelle DFlux. And Annabelle is from Las Vegas. So she's a band photographer, and she's managed to break into an extremely hard niche to get into. And she did that actually at the age of 16. And by 17, she had a full-time professional career as a band photographer. Annabelle is also an ambassador for Sigma lenses in America, and she also does training. She works for Photo Workout, which is the blog and review company, and we're going to talk a little bit about those as well. So she's had a really fascinating career. She's going to share some of our images, share some of our stories, and tell us what it's like to be a band photographer. So I'm going to bring Annabelle in, and feel free to fire away with any questions. And just pop them in the comments as you come in along. And also let us know where you're watching from too. So hi, Annabelle, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you
Very
so
good.
much for having me.
Yeah, it's early for you, isn't it? It's about 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's about 8 in the morning. So I'm like, pardon any little squeaks. I do have a parrot. He helps keep my hearing intact whenever I go shoot concerts because he's the first one to make me deaf.
And you were working last night, weren't you? Were you working for Sigma last night, weren't you?
I was, yes. I was doing actually a concert photography critique through Focus Camera. So we were kind of looking at people's submissions for concert photos, and I was sharing little tidbits on how to improve your concert photography.
Fantastic. So you've, like I said in the introduction, you've had an amazing journey because you started out very young. We were 10 or 12 when you got your first camera. Yeah. And then you got into, was it you shot your first band at, was it 15 or 16? And then by the time you were 17, you had a full-time career as a professional photographer. So, I mean, for a lot of people, that would be, you know, the dream, especially people who are music lovers, you know, but it must be an incredibly hard niche to get into for anybody really. But what even harder when you're that young, were you taken seriously? How did you break into this niche, and what sort of struggles did you come across in the very early stages?
Absolutely. So funny enough, I actually didn't want to do music photography. I started out as an animal photographer pretty exclusively because paired with my love of music, I've always really loved animals. And to me, that was a much less threatening subject to capture because, of course, you didn't have kind of the commentary or the judgment that we usually have from someone who's looking at a photo of themselves. I can't say I've ever had a dog start yelling at me that I was shooting the wrong side of them. But because I had gotten so kind of like deeply woven into photography, I was one of the only ones in my entire friend group that even knew how to operate a camera, let alone take good photos. And I fell into it kind of by accident. I had a friend who was dating a musician, which I feel like is one of those classic stories of how did you fall into something? Well, I knew someone who was dating a musician, and that musician really needed some new images. And I happened to be the only one in that circle who knew how to use a camera. So my friend begged and begged and begged, despite my reluctance and saying no. She finally convinced me to go ahead and try it. And I'm so glad that she did because it was just unbelievable. I loved it. I loved working with the personalities and working with the different styles. And music photography really lets you explore your creativity as well because it's not such a regimented type of niche that you can't step outside of the box to capture something interesting. Yeah. If anything, I think musicians want you to capture something different from everybody else. That's how it helps them stand out. And at that point, I was living in Los Angeles. So I was living very, very close to the Sunset Strip, which the world might know for venues such as the Whiskey A Go-Go, the Viper Room, et cetera, et cetera. But I did start very young, which meant that I didn't have access to venues like the Viper Room, which were 21 and over. But I did have access to the Whiskey A Go-Go, the Roxy Theater, and Hollywood and Highland, that little corner between Hollywood Boulevard and Highland Avenue, has an outdoor stage. And a lot of them had free concerts. You could just walk up and watch a show. Yeah. So I started kind of between all those venues and coming in and marketing and speaking to my local community and just gaining connections with people. I was just meeting a lot of people. Everyone was very curious as to why such a young kid would be out there with a camera instead of probably partying and doing high school things. And I just wanted to do photography, so I didn't really care about much else. So they were just very interested in the fact that someone so young was out there wanting to shoot. And through the relationship of, meeting all these local community bands and really building up that scene, I got very, very lucky that one of the bands in that local community that I was shooting actually ended up getting signed by a major label. And therefore, the images that I took of them started rising up as well. And everything just started rolling through there. While simultaneously, I wanted to have access to larger shows, which is generally not possible unless you either know the band, the manager, or the people behind them, or you work for press. So considering I did not know any of the personnel involved, I only knew my local community, I decided to start pursuing the press avenue and contacting local magazines and local online magazines to see if they would have any interest in a photographer. And I got very lucky that a couple of them gave someone so young a chance.
Yeah.
Which is why I genuinely do push that when you do go out there and you shoot local shows, really focus on building that portfolio through that, because all those magazines start to look for is, can you shoot well?
Yeah. So these positions with magazines, were they initially sort of like a freelance position? So you would go out and you would, and if they didn't like the images, they wouldn't pay you, effectively.
Yes. So it was definitely one of those, you might not get paid. You might get paid, but I was doing other types of photography at the time that were paying my bills. So it was okay for me to kind of go in there. And I do believe that whenever you start a business, you do kind of pay your dues. It is a risk you take. You're going to invest a lot of your own money. You're not going to get paid very well, if at all, for a little bit. And then it ends up kind of blossoming into something that's worthwhile and important. So it's kind of the paying your dues until those dues pay you back. So through press, I was not only just photographing musicians, one magazine actually needed someone to interview them. And I happened to have an interest in writing. I had always been very big literature buff as a kid. So I said, I can write. If you want me to start interviewing people, I can write. And then I'll take photos of them at that interview. So it'll be like a mix between the portraits and actually talking to them about their music. And as a music fan, that was pretty easy because I feel like I come from the perspective of the audience being like, what questions do people actually want answers to? And through that, I really, really started building up that like repertoire of bands who knew me, bands who recognized me, the PR agents who recognized me, the record labels who recognized me, and all the team members behind a performance. Everyone started to get to know me. So that kind of built even more of a relationship to the point where I started kind of asking, hey, I know I work for press and you know me through there, but if you like the photos that I captured for those magazine articles and whatnot, I am available for hire. I would love to come out and shoot. And quite a few started taking me up on it. And, as I mentioned with the local community, once people kind of take you up and then they keep you and then they get further in their career, you get further in your career with them. It's that symbiotic relationship. Bands just
it's all about building those relationships. And obviously you into your rock music and you were photographing bands that were within the, the music genre that you like. So you had that similarity with them anyway, didn't you?
Definitely. I mean, I have shot other genres as well, but there's nothing like shooting the genre that you're passionate about and something that was always of interest to you as a kid, because you just have that kind of intimate insight on it. I was like, well, I know how rock performers perform because I've seen a lot of concerts growing up. I've listened to that kind of music. I know what that energy is. And to me, music photography should really capture the essence of what that artist is, because if you think about it, especially in present day social media culture, what do people see first before they even hear a song? They see the photo. And that photo is going to influence whether they actually take the time to listen to a song or if they move on to the next artist that might have a more interesting photo. So I feel like the photography aspect of it is supposed to be so deeply tied into who that artist is to encourage the right people to click that link, listen to that song, and then everyone kind of wins at that point.
I mean, you just touched on something there, which was, the atmosphere, the electricity of doing a big show with especially with a rock band. That must be absolutely fantastic. So talk us through it. What's it like behind the scenes? What would be like an average day on the road with Annabelle if you were working for like a big name rock band?
Absolutely. Where first of all, forget about sleep. We don't sleep.
Yes.
Who needs sleep? I always say, well, I'll sleep when I'm retired. But but in actuality, the morning of tends to be me cleaning all of my equipment. You really do want to make sure that your sensor doesn't have any dust on it or anything of the sort. Although I do shoot with significantly wider aperture lenses, primarily because of the light intake and the separation between the subject and the background due to the depth of field, you still want to keep that sensor clean because you never know when you might start narrowing that aperture and then you're going to see all the dust and specks in your sensor. And plus, it's pretty good just to keep your gear well maintained. So I'll be cleaning everything up. And if it's an artist that I have not shot before, I will immediately go to YouTube, go to Instagram, Facebook, and try to look up their performances. Because the more information you have about how they perform, the better you're able to shoot. Because although you can't really technically have a shot list or really plan out, well, I'm going to catch this guy when he's standing over here and the other guy standing over here and have that composition, you'll never be able to accomplish that. But you can have pretty good insight as to how they perform so you're better prepared. For example, in the opening song, do the band members leap in the air? Or do they come out with something specific for the encore? What are they doing? Is there going to be pyro? Is there going to be this? Is there going to be that? Does someone switch instruments at some point? Because although stages are, or not stages, concerts aren't officially choreographed in terms of they don't have specific leg placements and things that they do choreograph their shows. You're going to find consistency within it because they usually have a very specific intro, very specific outro, and just the way that they perform. So research. And you know what? Even if it's a band I would still kind of like peek into their local or their more recent shows just to see if they change something up. Because the more knowledge you have, the better your images will come out. Make sure all your batteries are charged.
Because, when you're actually on that stage, I'm just thinking there from a, what the culture is like now, from a health and safety culture, how much freedom of movement do you have? Because there's wires all over the place, trip hazards, pyrotechnics, stuff like that. Can you run around and do what you want? Can you go wherever you want, get in close with the band members? Or is there like a sort of a barrier that you cannot cross when you're on the stage?
It depends. It definitely depends on the artist, and it also depends on why you're there. When I'm there with press, the general rule is the 3 and out rule, which means that press photographers get 3 songs in the little barricade up front, known as the photo pit, or at least we call it the photo pit. In actuality, that is not a photo pit. That is a barrier to keep the crowd from getting to the stage and to allow security, free movement to move around and protect both the crowd and the people on the stage. But press gets access to this little divided area for about 3 songs, which songs are about 2-3 minutes long. You can already imagine that's not a lot of time. And usually venues will not allow you to shoot from the rest of that venue, partially for safety reasons, partially the artist not wanting photographers constantly buzzing around them, and partially to ensure that the paying audience that is there is not having their entertainment impeded upon. But if you do work for the band as one of their crew members, you will usually get an all access pass, which is the crew member pass that technically allows you access anywhere inside that venue, including the backstage area, the stage area, et cetera, et cetera. However, I will not hop on the stage or go into specific spots very close to the band without first discussing it with them, because I'm not privy to what they're planning on doing. Sure, I can look at the YouTube videos and see they're going to do this, this, and that, but I don't know what they're comfortable with. I don't know where I'm going to be in the way. And I also generally really very close shots aren't always the most flattering shots. So I do kind of tend to be a little bit further back and shooting with a telephoto lens, because that optic compression is absolutely gorgeous. And you get a little bit closer to eye level. And if you kind of take the principles of portrait photography and apply it to music photography, you do want to be a little bit more eye level with your subject, just because it does a much more flattering face. So it really depends. I'll usually discuss it with the band prior, because I don't suggest just hopping on the stage without speaking to anyone, because on top of that, the band isn't the only ones on the stage. You've got their techs on that stage ready to run in and fix whatever might be breaking during the routine. So you really don't want to be in the way of the working personnel that are helping that show happen. The photographer is generally the last person anyone thinks of, because there's so many other people that are technically much more vital to ensuring that that performance happens the way it's supposed to. The photographer is just the one documenting it.
From the band's point of view, do you actually get physical feedback from the band, or you get suggestions from the band like, I'd love you to do some pictures like this, or we really liked what you did? Do you actually, the real band members, do you get feedback from them, or is it always just through a third party?
Funny enough, I've never actually gotten feedback from a third party. I've only gotten feedback from the band members themselves.
Wow.
And I think that's because the band members are usually the ones providing their team members with the images that they want used. PR agents might request something specific, but the band members are the ones that are providing all of this content to them. So usually I get the feedback from them because they would know how they like themselves seen the most. And plus, even if they haven't given me feedback, if I do know them well, I will prompt feedback from them because I need to know on my end whether I'm hitting the mark or I'm missing it in some capacity. So I always tell photographers that genuinely ask for a critique from the people you work for, because that's the only way you're going to improve. It's never like a personal jab at you or your skills. Sometimes it can be as simple as, I just don't like that side of my face when it's captured that way. Yeah. Can you capture it on the other side? Especially with band members who have very interesting hairstyles. They like their hairstyles shot in a very specific way because they feel like it doesn't look right when it's shot, say, on the other side. I know that's such a silly, minute thing to think of, but hey, we're people.
So with your actual band photography, this goes right the way through the actual concert itself, and then it goes to any after parties. Are you right the way with them until they go to bed, sort of thing?
I am. I almost feel like I'm their paparazzi to an extent. I don't like the paparazzi niche because that's usually photographing someone without their consent. So I say I'm the consented paparazzi. I was asked to follow them around. So it makes them a lot more comfortable with the photos as well. But they really, really like photos of themselves interacting with fans. Because if you think about it, there would be no music without the people listening to it. So capturing that, and it's kind of capturing that beautiful connection between a band, the people who love to listen to the music. It's something very, very important to all of the artists that I shoot. So I always follow them around, try and photograph kind of the facial expressions of the fans, them interacting with the fans, and just overall capturing that entire excited atmosphere.
And have you got some pictures you can share with us? I think you got your website there, haven't you?
I do. Let me see. Share screen. Okay, there we go. Going to a Chrome tab. Share. Can everyone see this? I think
I'll just add that in there now. Yep.
Perfect. So this is just a little quick rundown on just the concert photography portfolio that I put up. My advice always for photographers who have websites is that I use the blog to post the new sessions. My portfolio doesn't tend to change. So it's not updated very frequently, but you can see little examples of kind of the
Can you click in and enlarge them?
Yes, absolutely. So when I was talking about fan interaction, stuff like this I find to be very, very vital for music photography, because you want to be able to show that the musician really is performing directly to the fans below them. Because I feel like that just really shows the atmosphere. It creates that beautiful connection, between what's going on.
I mean, the lighting's fantastic, isn't it? With the...
Definitely. And I can absolutely say that wide aperture lenses are the way to go. Like a shot like this was shot with the Sigma 35mm f1.2 lens. And the reason for this is that there's not a lot of light. This was such a tiny little, or not necessarily tiny, but such a dimly lit venue that only those wide apertures will really be able to maximize the light that you have available. And it also provides really nice subject separation because, as you can see, even just here, the stage is probably very cluttered. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of people on that stage all the time, and you want the focus of whoever you're capturing to be just on that person versus the million things going on that stage. I'm trying to see if I have a good...
So what's your go-to kit? Do you have like a go-to kit setup, or do you have because you must have a huge amount of kit that you've got to take with you when you, especially if you're on a road with a band. But I suppose you still want that flexibility to be able to move around and without carrying a huge big bag from one position to the next.
Definitely. So I definitely have my specific go-to lenses, but as to which lenses I bring really depends on the venue that I'm capturing things in. For example, if I'm shooting at, say, an amphitheater or a stadium, I'm definitely going to bring my longer telephoto lenses. My favorite telephoto lenses being the Sigma 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 Sport, specifically the Sport one because it is so durable, and I cannot tell you the amount of times I've had my equipment bumped. I've even had my camera kicked out of my hand during really, really crazy crowd surfing session. And I really love the Sigma 135 millimeter f1.8 lens, although that is a fixed lens, which of course requires you to move your proximity to the subject. That 1.8 aperture is absolutely beautiful. Lets in a lot of light, lots of subject separation with that beautiful telephoto compression that does very, very nice things to facial proportions.
So have you got any real close-ups on this gallery here?
Here? Oh, I can't see where you're pointing if you're pointing somewhere.
Yeah, have you got any really close-ups up like real? Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah, this one I was actually pretty close by. So for closer shots, I really favor the 35 millimeter lens. I love Sigma's f1.2 because I cannot get enough of wide apertures. I'm like, give me the widest aperture you can possibly give me with an autofocus. If I could do an f.95 that has an autofocus, I totally would.
Yeah.
But not having autofocus during a concert is a very, very difficult thing to manage.
And do you use any flash, or is it just purely natural light?
Purely natural light, because generally not only is it frowned upon to use any sort of external lighting, such as flashes and strobes during a concert, from the perspective of the musician, it's very, very uncomfortable to have an incredibly bright light flash right in your face when you're not expecting it. At least in a studio session, you can tell your client, well, flash is going to happen, but in a live concert, they really don't expect that to happen, and you don't want to blind them or in any way impede the performance that they have to do. Because at the end of the day, it's kind of their performance is more important than whatever you're doing. So natural light, natural light, natural light. I promise you will find a way to work with whatever tumultuous lighting happens at that venue. Even kind of whoops, that's not the right shot. There we go. Even dreaded red light can be worked with. But also here, you can see that there's so many personnel on the stage that having that subject separation is pretty key.
So have you got any interesting stories from, obviously, touring with some bands, the rock and roll lifestyle? Have you got any interesting sort of backstage stories you can share with us?
I do. I have, my gosh, let me see if I can pull up one of the tours that I went on. So I feel like most of the stories have to do with just kind of adventuring around a city with an artist. This is a band from Finland, once they load, that every stop of the way we would kind of explore cities and capture just candid portraits, exploring the area, and just kind of doing whatever ends up happening in that spot. But there was definitely, I believe I have it in here somewhere. There was one stop of the tour in which our tour bus got stuck in the snow. So we unfortunately ended up missing one of the stops on that tour. And instead of being terribly, I mean, you never want that to happen, but instead of being horrifically disappointed, we actually ran out into the snow and started taking photos. Here we go. Yeah, this was us at a bus stop. And running around taking photos, because when you do look outside, it was the most gorgeous scenery. So instead of kind of like wallowing while we're waiting for the storm to pass and be able to go to the next city, we just took advantage and just started shooting out in the snow in any location. I mean, you're there to document what happens, even if it's not a good thing that happened.
So you're at this point, you're the only person taking photographs, is that right? It's just you and the band?
Yeah. Yes, because the rest of the crew members were trying to remedy our situation as quickly as possible to be able to get to the next show, because problem is any show that you miss is money you've missed. The venue is not going to pay you if you don't show up, of course, and cancellations and the refunds, it's a whole mess.
So with regards to, obviously, talking about cancellations and shows not going on, how is the restrictions affected the music industry as a whole? And has the music industry, do you think, adapted, or has it changed? Are bands still phoning you up and saying, Annabelle, can we get some shots for our social media, even if they're not actually going out on stage?
Absolutely. So the pandemic really did turn that whole industry upside down, because if you think about it, what is the music industry? It is large populations of people in an indoor area crowded in, which was absolutely, of course, not conducive to what was going on with the world at the time. So shows definitely took a long pause. Shows are still not necessarily back to normal. You'll still see tours canceling and it being very, very tumultuous, even though live music is starting to come back to an extent. In terms of live music photography, I can genuinely tell you that my concert shoots have diminished tremendously, not by anyone's fault, but by restrictions imposed by the venue, by tours being canceled. They're limiting the amount of personnel. And also, on top of that, artists don't have that same kind of income that they used to have, unless they're at a certain level in which they're kind of collecting royalties off of the music they've already released. So it kind of was a domino effect where one domino fell down, all of them started to fall down as a result. However, I'm a big believer in no matter what happens, you still have to be very adaptable. So instead of shooting concerts, I started shooting social media content for musicians, because the social media space became so vital for musicians to remain relevant in today's world. And all of a sudden, fans were turning to social media to kind of interact with their artists and find out what the artists are up to. And the artists are still recording, still writing music, because no matter what happens in the world, that's not going to change. And they're still releasing.
Yeah, because bands were even producing like mini concerts online, weren't they? And doing webinars and interacting with the fans that way.
Yeah, the live streams. I actually shot a few live streams just to see how it went, and that was a great way to still be able to,
as in shot live stream. You were there while they were live streaming, sort of thing, or
and I was shooting the photos of it, so they can still have like some live content for their social media accounts. But again, as a photographer, you have to be adaptable, and if I can't be out there in the photo pit shooting them on stage, then I'm just going to be out there in the studios or outdoors and shooting content for their social media accounts.
And where do you think the future is going to go with band photography? Do you think it's going to, there's a lot of talk about like the metaverse and, this virtual world. Do you think that's going to be, do you think you'll be able to watch your own or your favorite band in the virtual world in like 10 years time or 5 years time? Is that starting to come to fruition already? And I think you mentioned when we were speaking before about bands recording clippets as NFTs to sell to fans.
That they are. And funny enough, if you look at kind of music in Japan and the Japanese culture, they're already very, very far ahead with technology. I mean, they have concerts that are just entirely holographic. Like it's not even the actual person on the stage. And as well as there being artists that have actually created.
So you mean the actual band's backstage singing into?
It's all recording.
It's a hologram produced.
There is no actual musician.
Oh.
It's crazy. It's if you even Google it, it's just the craziest thing to look at. But actually a couple artists that I know have started investing in or creating music videos that are meant to be seen through those virtual reality goggles. Funny enough.
Wow.
So it's been crazy to see that music is kind of moving along with technology as well, and kind of working together with technology to do something different. As we were talking about like prior to this stream about the NFTs, I do see a few musicians actually releasing certain second clips off of their upcoming releases to sell as NFTs, so people can like own or quote unquote own part of a song before it is released. I think that just like any sort of artistic industry, especially when COVID hit, we're all trying to find ways to maintain an income and still have some money coming in so we can eat. So musicians are definitely looking at new and interesting ways to be able to still kind of retain an income, have that interaction with their fan and the communities, and still do what they do in as unique a way as possible.
And I suppose during this time as well, it helps you build your teaching side of things, isn't it? And training photographers, because photographers still want to get out there and still want to take pictures, even if we haven't been able to get out to live music concerts. So you're also an ambassador for Sigma lenses. So what does that involve as an ambassador?
Definitely. So my primary duties as an ambassador for Sigma is to provide the education. I am out there. I am teaching people. They're sponsoring me to be able to do workshops and reaching people and just really just answering a lot of questions from anyone who is interested in doing the same things that I'm doing. I mean, the reason that I was really, really enthused about that ambassadorship is that it does allow me to have such a large platform to be able to teach, because that was actually my goal in everything. When I started teaching, I just wanted to be able to have access to a platform to be able to do that on a much larger scale. And Sigma was able to provide that for me. On top of the fact that I've been using their lenses for years. So it was just kind of like that perfect relationship where I can teach on gear that I know like the back of my hand. Don't ask me any technical questions or engineering questions, though. I don't make them. But I can tell you from the perspective of a photographer how I utilize their equipment, and again, just providing that big platform. It's also why I write for Photo Workout. So it's photoworkout.com. I write educational blogs on there. I review products. I review programs. I do little how-to articles, just because I feel like when I started photography, there weren't as many educational resources out there. And if they were completely unaffordable or unattainable for a teenager like me. So the fact that now we have so many opportunities to educate, and we have so many opportunities to provide a lot of these really, really fundamental and vital resources to people who want to get into that industry is something that I really, really love. Just like I fostered kind of the community in music and really loved having that relationship connection with everyone there, I really loved fostering a photography community, because we are all there for the same reason. We love the same thing. So why not share our experiences and share what we know so that we can all create really beautiful images, rather than just kind of sitting there with our quote unquote trade secrets, when in my opinion, there really are no trade secrets in the way you use a camera. Someone's going to figure it out.
It's what it's all about, isn't it? It's sharing, inspiring others, being inspirational, especially, being a brand ambassador. You've got to be a leader, and you've got to share, you've got to inspire people. And I took a look at Photo Workout. It has some amazing blogs. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of blogs, and pretty much unbiased kit reviews as well. So what sort of stuff do you write for Photo Workout?
So I usually write little how-to articles, even if it's a photography niche that is not something that I do on a daily basis. I do love learning about all new things and kind of applying the knowledge that I have from all my other niches into a new niche that I'm writing about on Photo Workout. I also do reviews on editing software, just because even prior to the stream starting, we were talking about efficiency in your workflow, how you don't want to live on the computer because you want to live out there actually shooting. So reviewing different types of software to see what can actually help your workflow and help you move through that a lot faster is something that I really, really love doing.
And I mean, you were just sharing before, because I'd asked you, how many images do you take at a concert? You literally must take hundreds, if not thousands, of images. And if you had to sit down and manually edit each one of those before you went to bed, and then you were up the next day to be on the road again, and another concert the next night, you'd literally be burned out after a couple of weeks, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. That is a rough go if I had to do everything completely manually. Not to say there's no manual effort there, because I will go in and I'll do like little tweaks here and there in Photoshop, but I really did try and create more efficient system through, say, Lightroom, and mixing it in with any other additional software that I might add to my Lightroom in order to automate what I do. But I always kind of preface that you can only automate what you do when you are producing essentially quality content to begin with, because editing will not fix a bad photo. It's why actually learning how to be a good photographer is so vital. And the only way you can do that in music photography is just to get out there and just keep shooting. The more shows you have under your belt, the more things will, I guess, not be surprising to you, and you're able to kind of handle it and produce quality images right off of the camera. And then you can just use photo software to enhance whatever that camera sensor was not able to capture, because the lighting in concerts and all of that being so tumultuous, you're just not going to be able to capture it exactly how it was in your memory. And that's where photo editing software kind of comes in. Brings it all back.
if you sort of like, other than the software kit wise, if somebody wanted to get into band photography, what would you recommend? If you had a smallish budget, you couldn't afford a lot of kit, what would you say? Right, I wouldn't leave home without this bit of kit. This is what I would have.
If I had to do the absolute bare minimum lens, like this is the one lens that I have, and I'm not changing it for anything else, it's the 24 to 70 millimeter lens f2.8, simply because it does give you the most versatility. If I could only pick one lens and I wasn't able to pick any other lenses, because I usually have two camera bodies on me, usually with two different lenses, maybe one lens on my back. The 24 to 70 will give you the most versatility. Goes from a wide to a nice portrait. And the 2.8 still does let in enough light, although ideally I look for lenses that have a much wider aperture than that, because you might be at a dive bar with one tiny light bulb barely holding on for dear life hanging above the stage, and that's going to be a little hard with an f2.8, but you can still work with it. In terms of camera bodies, my suggestion is always look for full frame sensors if you can, because the larger the sensor, the more light is able to hit it and the better it's able to convert that light into something that you can see very well in an exposure. And look for cameras that do handle higher ISOs better in terms of noise, because you will be pushing your camera to its maximum capability whenever you shoot a live show. That's simply because live show photography is not conducive to how a camera actually works, because you're capturing action photography, which in order to raise your shutter speed to be able to freeze that, you do need light, which, as we all know, concerts severely lack. So you're going to find these really strange camera settings where you're bumping your ISO up, your shutter speed's going down. But if you set your camera to burst mode, you can kind of manage the shutter speed being slower, and it's such a balancing act. So I definitely suggest looking at cameras that are full frame, so they have that nice large sensor, and seeing how they handle different ISO levels. You can go to so many websites, and even Photo Workout has a lot of reviews on camera gear, so you can see how ISO is handled at the same ISO number amongst variety of different types of cameras.
So you got that camera, you got that lens, something that's going to cope with low ISO. What 3 tips would you give to somebody who's just starting out to try and get some? Because obviously you've got to get in front of the band. You've got to take these pictures. I suppose some areas you're not going to be able to take pictures or go in with the camera. So if you can't go in with the camera to take pictures, how are you going to get your stuff seen? So what would be the best route for somebody who wants to take pictures, who wants to start photographing bands and then actually make money, make a living as a band photographer?
Local shows. A lot of local shows are free. If the show is free, there's a 90% chance you can bring your camera in. I mean, I will suggest, of course, calling the venue ahead of time to make sure you're not driving all the way out there. You're paying for parking. You're waiting in line just to be told, oh, you can't bring that in.
Yeah.
So definitely call ahead of time. But your local dive bars, and again, I say the dive bar with the one light bulb hanging up, holding on for dear life. If you can shoot well at a dive bar, everything's going to be easy for you. That's right. So I say just jump right on in. Even if you don't know how to swim, jump in that deep end, because you're going to figure it out. Go to a local bar, little local venues. It's not going to be the best light. You're not going to get the same types of images that you see at like a stadium where Motley Crue is playing, for example. But if you can handle that, if you can bring out beautiful images that way, then anything that's thrown under or thrown in front of you is going to be easy to handle. Plus, you're getting connections with the local community. And I keep saying the same thing, which is when the artists are doing well, you're doing really well. So being able to kind of foster a local community and help each other get up there, then when their music career and you and your photography career will benefit you tremendously in the long run. Because again, you never know who's going to get signed to a major label. And if they get signed to a major label, guess who goes up with them?
Yeah. So you've been to this dive bar or a local venue. You've got some great images of a band, and you're really, really happy with them. What are you going to do with them next? Are you going to sort of like put them on social media and tag in a band? Or are you going to try and approach the band or a local publication? And obviously you've got to be concerned about your copyright as well. So how much do you give away in order to get yourself out there?
So there's so many different ways to achieve the same goal. And I was the kind of person that when I started and I want something, I will try every single way to get it. I mean, I'll simultaneously try different types of paths. So say you take those shots, you have those beautiful images, immediately make a website, plump them up there as your portfolio. invest in social media, make a Facebook account, Facebook page, Instagram account. I think TikTok's doing pretty well right now. And any sort of kind of social media that's up there, make an account, plop those images on there. I will tag the band because I know there's a lot of conversation as to whether it's a good idea for a band to repost images that were taken of them that they had technically not commissioned or technically not purchased or not. And all of that is very dependent upon the photographer that you are. As I was talking about, I do foster that local community because I believe the relationships are important. And if I took those images for free because I was out there just mucking around practicing, as long as we have that, again, that symbiotic relationship of I'm promoting the band because I'm mentioning who they are, where they can see their music and whatnot, I would hope they would do the same thing for me.
Yeah.
And word of mouth really is such a big thing. You want to build that reputation in that industry as someone who's reliable, who does really good work, who's not essentially going to hammer everybody for every little thing. So we'll try and foster that symbiotic relationship. Sometimes I'll just reach out to the band and just show them what I did and ask if they have anything else coming up and what my rate for that would be, if they like what I do, if they have anything in mind or anything that they need, as well as start contacting press outlets to be like, hey, I know how to shoot concerts.
Yeah.
You're a press outlet who needs photos of concerts. You see where I'm going with this.
and obviously you push the magazines as well, don't you? Go into the specialty magazines, which is how you started out.
Yes, that was definitely one of the rows of how I started out. And I'm the person who does cold email. Sure, you might not get a response, but what did you lose sending that email?
Yeah.
Because
well, if you don't ask, you don't get. That's
exactly. And the worst thing they can say is no. And if they say no, you're not in any different position from where you currently are. So I don't think there's any fear in that. There is going to be rejection. There's rejection in any facet of life, honestly. You won't be able to avoid that. It's just your response to that rejection. And my response is usually, okay, I got rejected right now. I'm going to improve and try again.
Yeah.
Get right back in there and be like, hey, I know you said no that one time, but look what I did. Is that a yes yet? And if they say no, then I'll go back and I'll start improving. And then I'll contact them and I'm like, so look what I did. Is it a yes yet? Sometimes they'll get annoyed enough just to say yes to get you to stop.
But that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about reaching out for opportunity. It's about building relationships. You know, you have the skill set there. You're a talented photographer, but the reason that you're where you are now, and you've grown so well in the industry, and you're an ambassador, you work with some really famous bands, and you've been on the road and touring with them, is because you put yourself out there. Now, there's probably hundreds of other photographers who take beautiful images, but just haven't taken that step. They haven't reached out. They haven't been bold enough because they're scared to. It's that self-doubt, isn't it? It's that procrastination. It's that imposter syndrome that a lot of photographers struggle from. And you really have, and because we're quite introverted people usually as photographers, we have to get used to putting ourselves out there. But I think obviously you're a very focused and goal-driven sort of person. So what's the next step for Annabelle? What's 2022 going forward look for you? What's your biggest goals?
Oh, goodness. Goals. That's always a hard thing for me to think about now, because I feel like for the last few years, my simple goal was keep doing what I'm doing, keep doing what I'm loving. I've been very, very lucky when I was younger and learning how to do photography to set goals to work with certain people or work with certain bands and then find ways to do that. But setting those types of goals, also keep in mind that if it doesn't happen, it's not anything personal against you either. So you can't allow that to kind of like crush you to a point where you want to stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I made those goals to work with certain bands and I would achieve them. And then once I kind of got through my bucket list and I was kind of sitting here, I'm like, well, I worked with every band I wanted to. Now what? Then I realized that my goal is just to keep doing what I love.
Yeah.
That is a simple goal. And for 2022, because the world is still kind of in that weird, tumultuous limbo-ish stage, I feel like you can't be too harsh on yourself with those goals, because completely not of your own fault, you may not be able to achieve certain things just because of cancellations and restrictions and whatnot. But keeping that goal of just doing what you love is probably the best goal to keep. And that's the only thing that I have. I'm taking every day for what that day is. And as long as tomorrow I can wake up and charge my camera and get out there and shoot something, it's a good day.
Brilliant. And that's it. We've had these restrictions put in front of us, but we've just got to keep getting out there, because if we don't put ourselves out there, if we don't keep doing what we do, then it will gradually phase out of our habit. It won't become part of our routine, and it's going to be so much harder to get back in there.
And the thing is, photography is still important. I think what a lot of artists and a lot of creatives are kind of losing in this pandemic is that they feel like they're not important anymore. And photography is still important. If anything, we can actually argue it's even more important now, because people are not even just in music photography, just in life in general, people are starting to really appreciate the little things that we took for granted up until it was taken away from us. And one of those little things is photos of our loved ones, and photographs that capture an emotion or a feeling or document a specific day. And if anything, I'm still going to sit here and just kind of be the proponent of photography is even more important now than it was prior.
Definitely. I think, year on year, there's more and more images put onto the internet. The demand for images increases. Imagery is effectively like the digital currency, isn't it? It's like if you want to be visible, if you want to be seen, and visibility is credibility for businesses, for bands, for us as photographers, you need to get yourself out there. So I think it's more important now than ever to keep producing those images for yourself, but also for clients, because if businesses, if bands, if entrepreneurs want to be seen and they want to dominate social media, then they need really good quality images, and it's up to us as professional photographers to take them.
Absolutely. And so much of how we perceive our world is through the images that we put out there and the images that we consume from other people. So having that good photographer and having those good photos and that good online presence is so important. And also, if you think about it, there's hundreds and thousands of bands and brands and companies and individuals who need good photos. That, to me, the reason that I love doing all of this education, fostering that community, is that it's not a competition, because there really is, in my opinion, the right client for everyone and enough clients for everyone. So why not just kind of band together and be like, hey, look, photography is relevant, it's important, and we're here to elevate everyone around us by providing them good images that help them kind of sustain through such difficult times.
That's great. Like you said, there's enough for everybody. There's enough ideal clients for everybody. Find what you love doing. Find out who is your ideal client, who you're very similar to, how you found rock music because that was your similarities to what you love doing, and then go out and excel at what you do and deliver and build those relationships, and then you'll get the success that you've achieved. So how can people find out any more about yourself?
About me?
Yeah.
So if you want to just Google my name, which is Annabelle DFlux, Anabel DFlux. Everything that I've done pops up, and you can just plop right on there. I love emails from people. If you have any sort of questions or just want some advice, have at it. Honestly, I'm like, hit me up on my inbox, social media. I'm always really happy to help someone else be able to achieve their dreams as well, because I think art is such a beautiful, beautiful community, and the world would be incredibly dull without it. So why not all of us go out there and have this common goal of providing the world with great photos and eliminating all the selfies on social media? Let's fix all those profile images and make them all professional photos. Brilliant. There's nothing more beautiful than scrolling through social media and seeing everyone have pro photos of their profile image.
Annabelle, you've been an absolute pleasure to interview. You're an inspiration to anybody who wants to get into photography, who wants to really make it, from coming from such a young age to breaking into a really hard to get into niche, and then absolutely smashing it, and, working with some of the top bands in the world. You really have lived the rock and roll lifestyle. You've achieved your dreams, and it's been great you sharing your story with us. So thank you once again for coming on.
And thank you for having me. You are awesome, awesome, awesome. Like, absolute I love pleasure. Talking about, both of us, I think, have that same thing in common. We love talking about what we're passionate about. And that's all we can do.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks again. And thanks, guys, for tuning in, and hope to see you in the next live.
Absolutely. Bye.